Today, we'll go beyond. Somebody said I'm demand. Sela, thank you. I like to be demand. Today, we're going to talk about a number of things. It was something really interesting conversation. If you guys are over at Tony Michael's place about Twitter and what's going on, I kind of announced to folks that from now on, Blue Sky is going to become my hub. By that, I mean I will not close my Twitter account. I'll keep it open. But I will probably, when it comes to my independent thoughts, I have a feeling, that I will start a Substack at some point soon. But at this point, with YouTube and trying to grow this, I'm pretty busy. And so independent thoughts of the written variety will start at Blue Sky. It has DMs. It has the look of old Twitter, which is a nice layout and no Nazis so far, which is one of those things that I like. I'm not a big fan of theirs. If you ever saw Inglourious Bastards, I kind of feel like the Jew Bear did about Nazis. He wielded a heavy baseball bat. Eli Roth, actually, an old friend of mine from New York. Weird story, another time. Maybe we'll get him on sometime. He can tell us about that. He's also a horror film director and such. In any case, we'll talk a little bit about that and Elon Musk being on a phone call with Putin. Full-on oligarchy at this point, right? We used to joke, like, oh, look at those oligarchs. We're at the point where there are people that absolutely have no business being on a phone call with a foreign leader, but they are, because Donald Trump's like, hey, look, friends, like he did when he was first elected, remember? And he was like showing everybody all the secrets at Mar-a-Lago and, making phone calls to foreign dignitaries with everybody listening in because he's so cool, because he's such an insecure, pathetic little... I'm trying to hold back the language, folks. I keep getting hit with limited ad suitability. And for me to make a living doing this, I have to have that not happen. So I apologize. I'm still going to curse, I promise. I know some of you will miss it if I didn't. What am I getting here? Wow, John Oliver's latest episode was dropped. Jason Zeha, I don't know. Was it any good? I mean, I tend to like him a lot. Melania Formonti, yeah, they showed her naked on Russian TV. I think a couple things going on there, but the Russians like to humiliate and remind people that they own them. And they've owned Donald Trump for a long time, back when Kevin McCarthy told Paul Ryan that they owned him in 2015. And we've known this, and so many failures from the New York Times to Merrick Garland to so many others. We're going to talk about that today with Brian Karem. Brian's awesome. He is a brilliant dude. You've probably caught him on, I used to go on more. He still goes on a lot, The Nerd Adventures with Mary Trump. He writes a column for Salon. He was the last correspondent for Playboy magazine in the White House. He was the one guy that you always respected because all the other press would sit there like meek little sheep, like, sir, what would you like us to do? And he would just yell out questions. And he's the one who got Trump on the record about whether he would accept a peaceful transition power, which showed up in Jack Smith's filings. Pretty impressive work. So Brian has been writing some very interesting things lately about what needs to be done with the media. Accepted, what I've talked about for a long time, which is our media, our information ecosystem is so screwed up. We have a bunch of liars, disinformation artists, propagandists who've been joined now by foreigners, obviously Putin and Russia, the Chinese, others, but on the right, they've been doing this stuff for years and getting away with it. It's only gotten worse, and now they're completely untethered from anything resembling the truth. They're eating the pets. They're eating the pets who live there. For example, that and FEMA stuff. And I mean, you can't have a democracy unless people that was the point of the First Amendment and freedom of press. And there was that so people would understand what was going on in their country. If you can't understand what's going on in your country, if you can't understand who's committing crimes and who's not, if all of that's mixed up in one big jumble, you can't have democracy. And we're going to have to address this. I'm going to let the Tony Michaels in here. Hello there, Tony, sir.
Yo, how's it going?
Good. I was just talking a little bit more about, my hobby horse, and it's becoming plenty of other people's, because I'm seeing some folks, Mark Jacobs, who used to be the Metro editor at the Chicago Tribune, Will Bunch, who's a good pal of mine. We'll have him on here at some point, Philadelphia Inquirer. He's a columnist. But what I try to remind people of, and did I say this on your show before? Because I don't. Hi, Cliff from near Indianapolis. John, is that Alter? Can't see. Let's click on there. John Allen. Hey, man, Indianapolis, only an hour and a half away. I'm coming to you live from what used to be known as the Radio City here in Cincinnati. That's right. We did for radio what Los Angeles does for movies and what New York does for Broadway. We didn't realize that radios would fall apart sooner and not be as important. So there's a big mistake. But that's why a lot of early stars from the 1950s, I think I mentioned it maybe when I was on with Tony last time, Rosemary Clooney being one. They're from right across the river here. The Clooney family in Kentucky. You've probably heard of a different Clooney too. Some guy named George. And other stars like that actually had to come through Cincinnati. We had a Warner Brothers studio here and all that sort of fun stuff. I digress, though. What I was talking about is essentially, look, it's simple. There was a time in the 70s, 60s where mainstream media, Pentagon Papers, the exposés on Nixon, where they actually did their jobs. I'm not going to say they were perfect, but Walter Cronkite, people like that, when he thought Vietnam was a failure, and he'd seen enough, he told people. Today, if one voice speaks out like that, they're drowned out by 100 other little drones saying, "What shall we tell the people? What shall we tell the people?" Because the corner office and the kind of promotion of the likes of these folks, that's all they want. And I know, because here's the beauty of it. The way Tony can tell you about some of the working class folk out in the Ozarks. I went to all the obnoxious schools with these people, so I can tell you all of their secrets and how much they suck, how insecure they are, and how much they want to rise to the top and make mommy and daddy proud of their careers. And if that means you bring down the United States of America, they feel safe enough in their little blue bubbles in New York that it won't affect them. I hate to tell them, but like armies can cross state lines, just like guns can. So yeah, maybe the finding out phase for them will happen at some point. But again, our media could not have failed us more, and could not be a bigger joke. And that's where Tony and I come in, and Hal Sparks, who show us just we're gonna get in there where they used to be, just like some of the comedians have done. Somebody mentioned John Oliver earlier, Stephen Colbert. I mean, it's amazing that comedians had to become true journalists because journalists couldn't be journalists, refused to tell you the truth. Like, the only part of journalism where they actually try to make you dumber is political journalism. It'd be like if they told you about football, and they're like, in the football game, Alabama hit a couple homers, while Auburn, they scored a couple goals and they came back. And that's our political media, the equivalent of that. Tony,
yeah,
what do you think?
I think that
am I just full of crap, or do you?
Well, you're definitely full of shit sometimes, especially when you got like a light penis on your shirt. But I will say that
where'd that go?
Yeah, I don't know. The thing that I'll say is that a little bit of the hopium and copium that the media is trying to spend here, and some commentators are trying to spend, I think it's not bad, but I think it is creating an alternate reality that will never exist. And the problem with that is if you build your hopes on the fact that Trump's going to he's just going to do what we want, you're really going to demoralize yourself next year a lot. Like, next year is going to be demoralizing to you if you're not really in tune with not exactly what is possible, but what really could be possible. Because if you really wrap your head around about the hurdles that they are going to be willing to jump over to subvert the Constitution, man, you'll demoralize yourself less next year because you'll be ready for it when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, again, like I've always said, you can be an optimist, which I am, and a realist at the same time.
Right.
I saw somebody in there, and I don't want to criticize anybody specifically, but somebody said, Hal was delivering too much hopium. Well, if Hal was, I was too. And I've already, issued my mea culpas. I've already apologized. Look, Hal's a really smart guy, but I worked on 3 presidential campaigns and numerous Senate and House campaigns, 2 polling firms, wrote ads for Joe Biden, did PR duty for a group trying to win back the Ohio State House in a galaxy far, far away when that was doable. And we did in 2008 by knocking off 7 Republicans. Was the first digital PR person for every town for gun safety hired by Bloomberg their group there. I can go on. I'm not trying to give you my resume. I'm trying to show you that I have experience in all of this stuff. I've worked in politics for years, and I thought we were going to win big that night because every single thing that had predicted to me a big win that I'd gotten right for the 6 previous election cycles, or 7, 17, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, didn't come true in 2024. And so I don't know that Hal was dishing hopium. He may have actually been looking at things as a smart person and thinking that, like a lot of us did, that this looked like it was going to go in the right direction. And the truth is, we now know, again, we may have been wrong, but it's going to end up having been a lot closer in popular vote and even in the amount that Trump won by. But no, I didn't think he could breach the blue wall states. Yeah, and I was overly optimistic about some other things too, but no, I didn't. I mean, you have to understand, like we had dominated Michigan and Pennsylvania. I mean, do you know what we did there in 2022? Like, we took everything, including both houses of the state legislature back in Michigan and the state house back in Pennsylvania. Like, I don't think a Republican had won in either place since Trump did in 2016. We won all of the statewide races, senators, governors. So, I mean, there was reason to, based on that, in addition to everything else. And we'd started a pretty good winning streak in Wisconsin, too. We reelected a governor there. We elected a Supreme Court justice in a special election there. Everything I used to try to predict this election, I used in that Supreme Court election. Same deal. The polling was getting it wrong, and I got it right. But this time it didn't happen. So you know what? Shame on me. And I'll take whatever. I'll eat whatever crow I have to. But and I'm not. I don't know exactly where Hal's getting any specific information from or whatever. But I know I was getting specific information from a lot of places, and they all seem to point to a pretty good result.
We talked about this before. When speaking of where you get information and hopium and copium and that sort of thing, and how you deal with this. We talked about this before that, the evidence that I used was the actual polls, not the polls, the calling polls, but the polls from Ohio, from your state, on the votes on protecting women's rights, the polls in Kentucky where they reelected Andy Beshear, a Democratic governor, where in Virginia, just in a recent election, Glenn Youngkin asked the people of Virginia to elect Republicans to the House so he could abolish women's rights to abortion in Virginia.
That's right.
And they told him no. So I was
got crushed. And right. Mississippi, we came within 3 points.
So I was using a lot of those.
Yep.
Right. I was using a lot of those as my evidence. Now, I think maybe the naive part that we were really not looking at is who Trump was speaking to. I think I was in tune to that a little bit, but I didn't quite understand the counterculture that existed inside this broligarchy type thing, where Dana White, the head of UFC, spoke at his victory speech, the way election.
Hulk Hogan spoke at the. It was a campaign run on toxic masculinity. That's why I put this up here by Jay. This comment, and I thank you for the comment, but you never had a black woman running. And there's truth to that. I believed after Barack Obama, I had more faith in our country. And that's on me. Sure, I knew there'd be a certain number of misogynists. I knew there'd be a certain number of racists. I guess what I didn't count on is the combination of having overt misogynists like J.D. Vance and Donald Trump and all the people they surround themselves with, running a toxic masculinity campaign directly going after women, and that somehow they would still get a large percentage. They not only still won white women, but their percentage of Latinas went up by 7 or 8%. And they crushed it among Hispanic men, won that demographic, for example. These were things where I believe that there's such misogyny, and I've had these broader sort of philosophical conversations, even with Tony here. I'm not going to get into it. Again, my views on evolution and things of that nature. But we are an insecure, in need of feeling strong, and in that way, weak species. And I will say there are a lot of men out there who aren't smart enough to see past the toxic masculine garbage that Trump was throwing. And he just, no, I knew they were making gains among Latino voters. I never thought he would win Latinos. I never thought that could happen, and he could win, men in that demographic. I never thought he could gain as many points. I don't think it was huge, but big enough where I think he gained a number of points among black men. No, I didn't think that was possible. And maybe that's on me for not understanding that in many cultures, not just among white folks, misogyny plays. And saying, look at and I'm putting this in their words, okay, not mine. Look at these uppity women coming here and trying to say they should be leading things and whatever. No, we're the men. We run our house kind of bullshit. And I think a lot of that happened. And I think they were able, it's not that it's that simple. There's all the right-wing disinformation on all sorts of issues that played into that, stereotype. There's all of the failures of mainstream media. There's all of the failures of Merrick Garland to not go after any of the co-conspirators with Trump. I mean, Jesus Christ, we have texts of Mike Lee basically planning things out with Mark Meadows. And the guy is still sitting there in the Senate taunting people. I didn't know that we would have an attorney general who'd have like a field mouse for 4 years. There are a lot of things that played into this, because whenever you think that something has one cause, you're being very simple-minded. No offense, but that's the truth of it. There's always numerous things that happen for something like this to happen.
I think that's the idea, and I think going forward, if people put in perspective of what can be because of who Donald Trump is, then we'll be much better off. I mean, for instance, and I've got to go here soon, but I want to bring this up. He's picked Tom Homan, one of his former ICE directors, to be his quote.
Just go watch a video with that a-hole. Oh my God.
Now, in an interview recently, 60 Minutes, and I showed the clip on the show, he said that his solution to not separate families when he's deporting people is just to deport the whole family. But that would give you cause for concern, because those people probably have birthright citizenship, which Donald Trump has said he wants to get rid of birthright citizenship. The problem is that birthright citizenship lives inside the 14th Amendment, which means that Donald Trump would have to shred the Constitution. And these are going to be the test that we are going to be able to tell how protected we really are. But be prepared that Donald Trump is certainly going to say, fuck the amendment, fuck the 14th Amendment. And if he's willing to say fuck the 14th part of the 14th Amendment, why wouldn't he upend the entire thing? Why would we need to say the 25th Amendment's gone, the 19th Amendment's gone, any amendments I don't like, they're all gone.
If he does that, and then the courts, including his Supreme Court, which we might as well call it, are not willing to stand up to him on that, then which I don't.
Right, but what if they
them,
make a decision to stand up to him, and he just says, "I don't give a shit"? I mean,
yeah. Well, then the next level is those that would implement the orders. Right? Are there enough generals in various positions who are just going to say no? I took an oath to the Constitution and refused to do it. I mean, there are people that can stop him from getting there. Will they? And I don't know what courts are one place, the military is another, the bureaucracy is another, which of course is why they want to cull the bureaucracy and completely, rip out by literally from its roots, our current bureaucracy, and replace it with all their little yes men and yes women. Because they know the bureaucracy can get in the way and slow a lot of things down. I mean, that's another one of those institutions that the permanent civil service, who are not political appointees. Once you replace those people with political appointees, you're communism. You're Russia under Brezhnev or Stalin or something. I mean, that's what you really are,
right?
But I mean, that's what they're talking about doing. So yeah. You're 100% right, Tony. I mean, that is when we're going to know.
That's where we got to look to. So that's what you got to pay attention to, and you got to realize that that's what's at stake. It's not that, Oh, is he going to challenge the court? Of course he's going to challenge the courts. Of course he's going to challenge us. Of course he's going to challenge the norms. He's going to challenge the institution of democracy. He said that. He keeps saying it. They keep saying it out loud. Cliff, I can't wait to rewatch. I'm not going to be able to watch it live, but I can't wait to watch your conversation with Brian when I found out that you're going to.
And you know why you're going to be able to watch it?
Why is that?
Because as part of the new, we want everyone to be able to see as much of our content as possible plan, we rebroadcast, folks. So I think this one will rebroadcast at 9 p.m. tonight. Don't leave. That's not a
no permission structure.
But to other folks, I'm not giving you permission to leave. Please don't. please. I'm serious. But and then we'll also play it the next morning, because I know there are folks that maybe missed something. They want to catch something else. And go in there, and there's some other folks that aren't free at this time, work and stuff. So I want to give people the opportunity. But yes, hopefully it will be a really good conversation, because Brian is a really smart guy. And what I like about Brian too, like you and me, is Brian talks a lot. So I can just sort of just hang here and just toss it to Brian and let him.
That's great.
Let him go to town.
Let him go to town. Well, that's great. Well, I can't wait to see it. Cliff and audience, thank you for having me for just a few minutes to give my insight on a few things. I'm going to go take a leaky. Is what I'm going to do.
Okay. Well, we don't get even a few minutes of the Polish, Ozarkian kind of side of things in here. I feel like we're missing an important perspective.
Well, that's great. I'm gonna go drain. I'm gonna go drain the radiator now, and that way you get. That's the Ozarkian way to say I got to take a piss. Is I got to go drain the radiator. So I'm gonna go drain my radiator. Cliff, audience, great to see you guys.
Take care, bud. And that was the Tony Michaels, everybody, which I'm sure you know. I saw some folks in the chat. We can just sort of answer some questions and comments. 22nd Amendment. People were talking about what they would do for Trump to be able to run for another term. I mean, again, at that point, I don't know if they need to change an amendment. I don't think they can. In fact, I'm actually quite sure they can't. Oops, I missed one. Hold on, guys. Not that I like to disrespect anybody, but putting you up there, Spacco, because yes, I got your email. It has been a crazy, crazy period of time, and I like a lot of what you're discussing. So we'll chat, my friend. But to get back to the basic point, again, he doesn't have the votes, right, in the Senate and the House. I mean, you need overwhelming majorities, right? What is it, 3/5? God, I need to go back to my civics. Or you need to get 2/3 of the states, something of that nature. He doesn't have that. He's not going to get that. If he does these things, he's going to do them because he's directly ignoring the Constitution. And then we have a constitutional crisis, and then we have it's put up or shut up time. Does our Supreme Court, who has disagreed with Trump on some things, don't think I'm defending them. They're the most awful. I saw some people putting Opus Dei in there. Yes, they are what we call Opus Dei hires, Opus DEI hires. They're awful. They've pushed their ridiculous religious agenda on us and their ridiculous corporate agenda on us, and don't think I can trust any of them as far as I theoretically could kick them, but wouldn't, because I'm a peaceful citizen. But they have on some other things actually stood up to Trump. Will they? I would never bet on them standing up to Trump, but I suppose if he just tried to ignore a straight out part of the Constitution, maybe they will. If they don't, again, then it's not, I was just following orders, sir. It's up to staff members. It's up to generals and soldiers. It's up to all sorts of people to literally refuse what he asks them to do. If he tries to send the military into our streets, we have the Posse Comitatus Act. It is illegal. I've said this before. There is a reason for the existence of the phrase crossing the Rubicon, because Rome had the same rule. They knew if you brought the military into your city, eventually the military would take over, and you would have chaos, and you would have innocent people killed, and blood would run in the streets. And you know what? They did cross the Rubicon, and Caesar became an emperor, and that was Rome. So there's that. Which is a law he could, part of our Constitution he could break, or a law he could break. So, I mean, a lot of this is going to come down to what he, not just what he's willing to do, but what our courts are willing to allow him to do. The Supreme Court could also choose to not weigh in on something. Some of the lower courts, that are controlled by Democrats, could stop him from doing some things. State courts could. But if they don't, if the Supreme Court jumps in and paves a way to fascism, as absolutely they could. As I told you folks, I try to be an optimist, but I'm not going to ever lie to you. I mean, do I put my trust in Clarence Thomas or Alito or Gorsuch? I mean, I don't put my trust in these people. So in the end, I mean, again, there's three of them, as I like to point out, that are outright fascists. That's how far the court is at this point. Clarence Thomas, Alito, and Gorsuch are just outright fascists. I think they would overthrow the government in a second, and they wouldn't think twice about it. And I put Brett Kavanaugh and Amy Coney Barrett in the far right authoritarians. They're not quite fascists, but they're authoritarians. And then I put Roberts into the radical right wing, as in he may believe in constitutional government, but right-wing constitutional government. So, I mean, there is a chance that Roberts would break or Coney Barrett on some of this, but again, I wouldn't put any of my faith in them at all. And then we have to hope that the people stand up to do the right thing. First of all, we have to be out in the streets and say, no, this isn't happening here, not in America. But we need to see it from the military, from the bureaucracy, from other people, from his own staff, willing to stand up to him and say, no, this isn't happening. It happened last time around, right? We just don't know who's going to be there this time, and he'll try to handpick them. Milley stood up to him and said, "You're not shooting protesters." No, right? So it wouldn't be like this hasn't happened before. Well, yeah, I'm looking at what Brian Champagne is saying. A dictator doesn't need a Supreme Court. You're right. I mean, again, if he pulls the Andrew Jackson and says, "You've made your decision, now try to enforce it," and he just goes in and but again, that's where the people refusing to do what he asked them to do. Again, it wasn't the courts that saved us from him shooting protesters, I think he said, in the legs, which they would have missed and killed people, and shooting people in the legs is sort of awful. Anyhow, it was Milley that stopped him from doing that. Okay? John Kelly stopped him from doing some of his other awful ideas. McMaster's, some of the military folks in there. Are they going to do that? The current ones? Not if he gets Michael Flynn in there, I'll tell you. But, that's part of the problem. We've been too nice. Michael Flynn should have been court-martialed. And we wouldn't even have this problem. We wouldn't have to worry about him anymore. I believe I see one Brian Karem, the infamous and famous all at the same time Playboy pinup. Oh, no, that's right. He was a Playboy correspondent. I get that mixed up all the time. Oh, look at that. He's even got the sunglasses for it. The last... Look at... Are you freezing up on me? Oh, Yeah, you got to get the hat on. Look at this guy. It's like half returned from the dead. Last Playboy correspondent in the White House who got Donald Trump to say that he wouldn't necessarily respect the results of the election. And Jack Smith put that in his filing. And it would have mattered if, we were a country of laws and didn't follow some stupid State Department memo put out by a Nixon and Clinton lawyers that I think is such a pile of crap and has no actual legal bearing, but of course we'll follow it.
Yes. Amen. Hallelujah. What's up, Cliff? Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you, man. I'm really glad you're able to come on today because you wrote two really good things.
I think they're all great, but go ahead.
Well, have you ever written anything that's not great? But these two are of a piece, so to speak, which is to say, I've been on a war path for years now against the New York Times, and you wrote a piece for Salon basically saying, is the New York Times to blame for Trump's victory? I think they are a lot to blame, and I think people like you and me, because I now live in Cincinnati, even though I'm from the East Coast originally. You now live on, I don't remember if you live on the West Coast or East Coast, but you live on one or the other. But you both, there you go. But you're from Kentucky. So we get this, which is if you're from smaller towns or medium-sized cities, which is what Louisville and Cincinnati are, people don't understand the enormous, extraordinary influence what the New York Times decides to cover and not cover has on papers across the country that don't have the resources, don't have the reporters. If they see the New York Times or Washington Post covering something like, well, we should be on that. That's one effect. But why don't we talk a little bit more about what your thoughts on the New York Times, and then the other one you wrote on Twitter, and that was music to my ears because I've been speaking out on forever on how the United Kingdom does things, Canada, Germany, that there can be. We had some limits on political speech. We've decided never to enforce them. We've decided on other ones, to not to let these sort of extremists define what that you can say anything. And the truth is we know if you don't have information, you talked about the fairness doctrine disappearing and other things. If people don't get the truth, and there is one singular truth, if they don't get the truth about things, they can't vote then knowing the truth. And therefore, we're going to get elections like this where all sorts of people will vote for somebody and then afterwards tell you they didn't even know a lot of things about them. So I want you start with whichever one you want to start with.
I'll start with the last one first, and before I get to the New York Times, the Washington Post, and the other purveyors of prognostication. I don't know if there's one truth. I know there's one set of facts. We have to argue from the facts. And, there's 3,000 religions in the world, maybe more, and all of them have their truths. So settle on let's start with vetted facts. And that's where we need to be. And until Ronald Reagan began and this is the rant, I'll just give it so we can have at it.
I know I've got it written down here, but why don't you just do it? You'll be better giving it again than me reading it. So Go.
Well, until Ronald Reagan threw out the fairness doctrine and all the media ownership restrictions, and there are plenty, and that was followed by similar actions from every succeeding president, and that includes Democrats. People did.
Bill Clinton in 1996, the Telecommunications Act was horrible.
Yes.
All right, go.
And then people trusted their newspapers, radio, and the television news. There's a cause and effect here. We're long overdue for a reintroduction of the guidelines that gave us trust in the Fourth Estate. Calling for that type of regulation actually supports free speech, destroys media monopolies, and provides us with a fertile ground of vetted facts, which leads to cogent and meaningful discussion on the issues of public debate. And that's because when you reintroduce these guidelines, you reintroduce the idea of responsible free speech, and allowing social media platforms to publish disinformation, often behind anonymous handles. And this is where I get pissed off with social media. Register in your name. Own what it is that you say. But they're not going to do that because then you wouldn't have the bot farms, and the anonymity allows you to make more money because it promotes dishonesty. It maximizes profits for the platforms at the expense of the audience they exploit, and poisons the well of information from which we all drink. Going forward, if you want reliable information, you have to reintroduce the regulations that stress facts over profits. And those regulations have to be enhanced by including social media. This isn't censorship. This is the opposite of censorship. It's a promotion of facts over dangerous propaganda. And Cliff, we all used to realize this. There is a lot of nuance in this issue. You can't shout fire in a crowded theater when there is no fire, which is in effect what people are doing when they invent their own facts or give alternative facts. Libel and slander are not protected speech. So if you can identify who's libeling you or slandering you, you can take action against them. But if they're from some anonymous handle, you can't do anything about it. Satire is protected. Courts of law decide on disagreements. Anti-SLAPP legislation protects the small and independent publishers against corporate bullies. And remember, there's about 6 of those that own and operate everything you see, read, or hear. And if you write something about a large corporation like Monsanto or Dow and you're investigating them, they decide to sue you into non-existence, anti-SLAPP legislation won't let them do it. But please, I said, please tweet out simple, misleading accusations. It's so helpful in solving the difficult, important problems by further dividing the electorate at our expense, while the rich keep getting richer. And that's the problem in a nutshell. I get tired of people saying it's a liberal media. It's not a liberal media.
Oh, my God.
It's a
corporate media. What a joke.
It's geared toward money. So what they do is entertain you by playing to your own prejudice. We no longer inform you. It's base entertainment, and it needs to end. There's my rant.
Let me say a couple things but I think you brought up a couple key and important points. One, when we have an owner of the Washington Post who pulls back and will not allow an endorsement to be made because he's worried about regulations for his not side project, his main project, Amazon, we are in a ridiculous place.
Well,
the lack of breaking up monopolies in this country, the lack of antitrust action that's been one of the Democrats' biggest failures as far as I'm concerned. I know it's not easy, but I mean, again, what you brought up, and this is not just, this is, conglomerates, but when you bring up media companies, we were complaining, I was somewhat of a kid then, but in the 80s, people were complaining about, oh my God, the media is becoming too, it's getting too concentrated. We had 60-something media companies, and we now have 6, as you said, that control like 80 to 90% of our media. It's insane.
When I first, and that goes back to your first question about the New York Times and the Washington Post, and I think it's an act of cowardice what they do, and it's all about protecting their own self-interest, and I think they're horrible. And I think that finding a well-informed news organization is, or if you're counting on a well-informed news organization, you might as well give it up. That's not going to happen until you break up the media monopolies. When I first got into this business in the 80s, here's the facts. 80% of what you see, read, or hear at that time was owned by 24 companies. There were maybe 60 or 70 players out there on the landscape. And a lot of smaller, very small, community newspapers that were independently owned. Today, 6 companies own or operate 90% of what you see, read, or hear. Here's some facts for you. There are twice the number of people on this planet as on the day that I was born. There's a quarter of the number of reporters. One great example is the Courier-Journal and Louisville Times, an independent voice in Louisville, Kentucky, a great regional newspaper that had, at the time, and when I was working there in the mid 80s, it had desks in London, Paris, in DC. It had a bureau that had more than a dozen people that just covered what went on in Kentucky. Covered all of the 2 senators, covered all of its congressmen, covered the judiciary, covered the executive branch. They had about a dozen, maybe 3 or 4 full-time, but up to 8 different part-time reporters covering the state legislature. They got bought out by Gannett. They are now today, instead of a newspaper that plays to 250,000 people, which was their subscribers, they have about 20,000 subscribers. They are a shopper. They have closed all their bureaus. Gannett bought them out. And by the way, Gannett was one of the cowards who refused to endorse in the election. They said, why should we we'll save money. Why should we put reporters in all these places? We already have reporters there from others. They'll just work for Gannett. So you have shrunk the number of reporters. You've reduced the reporting staff and the management staff and editorial to people who don't have the experience that they used to have. They're coming right out of college. They're going straight into the White House. They don't know shit. And then they're being thought of as they're part of the in crowd and that what they say matters, and it doesn't. So all of this has contributed to the demise of media. And the problem is that there's nothing to replace it. I wrote a book. It's called Free the Press. Read it. There's my plug. Unasked for, shameless plug. Read it. I want you to tell people where to find various works of yours. That's why we got you here. Wherever fine books are sold, including Amazon, that fucker Jeff Bezos. So anyway, maybe I'm part of the problem. I want you to buy into it. But you can't make Amazon not carry your book. You don't have to. Yeah. I remember when my book came out on McCain, I would always send people to independent bookstores if I could. But when I couldn't, what could I do? We can't. You can only do what you can do, man. You're not. I know that you are strong, but you are not a godlike creature, as far as I know. Well, I think I am, buddy, but no, I'm not. But that's a nice John Wayne there, by the way. Go ahead, Pilgrim. So, at the end of the day, I asked the Biden administration to take a look at that and to, but he's big about busting up monopolies. Bust up the media monopolies. Oh my God, absolutely. Until we do, we're screwed, blued, and tattooed. And this election just tells me how bad the misinformation is, because there are people who actually knew what Donald Trump is all about, and he won the popular vote. So there are people going, yeah, I don't want that. And they don't even.
But they normalized it. But what they did is they made Donald Trump's behavior, and I get it. It's hard when there's a new normal and that becomes something that happens every day. And let's face it, this guy, one day he's performing fellatio on a microphone. You know, the next day he's talking about the size of Arnold Palmer's penis.
For that, I think
he probably did, actually, among young men, right? The next day he's talking about, Arnold Palmer in the showers and, you know, the size of his penis. And I mean,
well, Cliff, you know what? When I heard that, it was like, Donald Trump is a guy you don't want to go golfing with, because at the end of the day, you don't want to have to take a shower. He's the guy that,
you know, he's checking you out in the shower because he's jealous, because we know that Stormy said his is like a little mushroom. But I digress. And the point is that I get it how when someone's saying that stuff every day, it's harder and it becomes more normal. But it still is a media decision to make it normal and say, we are going to cover him like a normal candidate. The Philadelphia Inquirer, owned by a private foundation, did not do that. They did not do that.
That it's not that it's that here's the mistake the press made. And they made it, they felt that if there are people, and I know people who made these decisions, and I had discussions with some of them, it's like, we need to show how bad he is so you can compare him to the normalcy of Harris. The problem was, what they didn't understand is that by the repetition of that particular message, that it made for the
made it normal.
What it did, yes, it gave people pause to think that, well, you know, when you compare the two, shit, if they're just mentioned, he must be okay, and so we vote for Donnie, and that's the problem that we have in the press, and that is exacerbated by the fact that our decision makers in the press are by people who do not have the gravitas that we used to have in the press. For example,
oh my God, Sulzberger is like a nepo baby of a nepo baby. Nobody in that family's done anything since 3 generations ago.
When I first walked into the press office in 1984 or 85, Helen Thomas was one of the first. Well, she was the first person I met, and Helen said,
I got to meet her once, and she was incredible.
She said, listen, Brian, just ask the question. Doesn't matter what the answer is. Doesn't matter what the question is. But by asking it, whether they answer it good, bad, or indifferently, you've put the issue on the record. So never be afraid to answer it. I said, well, they called me rude. And she goes, I've never heard of that. That doesn't compute in my universe. You're not there to kiss their ass. You're there to hold them accountable. They work for you. Ask the question. And then I was introduced to Sam, and Sam said, listen, Brian, take a look at and listen to that first row in the briefing room. That was before they called it the Brady briefing room, but in the briefing room, that first row there's 200 years of experience among those 7 people sitting in that row or more. Listen and learn. And then he made a joke about Helen having 190 of it, and she said a smart-ass comment to Sam, and Sam said, hey, Helen, it's okay to have an unexpressed thought. And Helen said, hey, Sam, when it comes to you, I have a lot of unexpressed thoughts. I didn't know what I was doing for the rest of my life. But
she was so good. I mean, she just was. I mean, when she was in those years, man, when she still was boom, 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 she was great.
She was. But the point, you take a look at that first row in the briefing room today, Cliff. How is there?
Oh, God.
Is there 100 years of experience among those 7? No. And they all think
negative 23 years or so. I mean, does little what's his name get to sit in the front there? You know, Fox and Friends Spawn. I can't even. It
doesn't matter to me who it is. I think everyone in that press room lacks the gravitas. You know,
you're right.
Well, I was in the East Room one day when Biden was going by, and I asked him a question, and this pool reporter tried to come in and run over me, so I just ran over her, and Biden started to answer me. And then she tried to butt in, and then she goes, hey, I'm in the pool. And I said, that's why you ought to shut up, because you ask stupid questions. And Biden just sat there and smiled and did this. He looks at me and goes, and then, and that's the problem. They think they're more important than they are, and they suck. Every single one of them. You ought to be.
Yeah, but it's also, see, you're a classic example, and sadly, you're like one of the last probably of a dying breed. I mean, please don't die. Well, at least while you're on here. I mean, we actually might be good for ratings. So I'm kidding. We love you, Brian.
Another show. Just donate to save the Brian Karem Fund. Give early.
No, I've seen your cute grandkids. You can't go dying yet. You got to give them some time. Okay.
I'm
yeah. No, what I mean is like, you know, and I'm not just saying this, man. I look at you, I listen to you. You're a freaking journalist, man. If I had journalist, you know, in the old sense of that term, in, you know, like in the dictionary, you're the kind of person I would have your picture next to it. Olivia Nuzzi, for example, not so much a journalist. Stephen Glass back, let's go a little bit back, at the New Republic, not so much a journalist. I mean, the problem is we've run out of this last generation of folks that went into this. We had a guy who lived near me here in Cincinnati. His name was Jack Cannon, and he'd been to Cincinnati Enquirer. Did you know him?
Yeah.
Jack was a terrific guy. Like, we loved him. I mean, sadly, he passed away way too soon. In his late 70s, he had a heart operation and was expected to just be okay and never made it out and was just destroyed us. He used to treat my boys were then young, and he used to, when he'd see them, you know, he'd be like, pay them a nickel each to carry his groceries or, you know, just for fun. I mean, he was this grizzled veteran. He'd been in the Cincinnati Enquirer, what you're talking about, when they had a bureau in like Middletown and a bureau in, like, they had bureaus everywhere, right? Like, and he was in all those bureaus. He also went abroad for them. I think he'd been in London, you know, for them and whatever. I mean, he was the real deal in the way you're the real deal. The problem is that, again, because all they've become is profit centers, it doesn't matter anymore about getting people the truth. It used to just be accepted that the media, that news operations, the price of having licenses, for example, if you were NBC or whatever, is that you would have news, you'd lose money on it, but you'd get people information. You can make your money on Friends or whatever. But now everything has to profit. And so even with newspapers, you know, I mean, when I first got to Cincinnati, so I was, you know, we first, actually Ohio, because I was in Columbus for a bit, because I was hired as the spokesperson for the then state treasurer, Kevin Boyce. Okay. And I would go and meet with folks. There are maybe only 2 or 3 newspapers left that had Columbus bureaus, like the Akron Beacon, you know, Journal, which was a terrific newspaper, the Cincinnati Enquirer, and, you know, maybe the Cleveland Plain Dealer. I'm not sure I don't think any of them do anymore. No, forget London, Paris, New York, whatever. They don't even have Columbus, where the state government is. Right. You know, they don't even have Columbus bureaus anymore. And so, you know, again, like, you're not going to, so what they do is, again, they end up taking their cues, because they don't have anybody to tell them what's going on. They're like, hey, the New York Times thinks that's important. You know, let's crib from them and write what they're writing. And you end up just getting garbage. You don't get the sort of the views from people that have been there. And again, yeah, okay, I was making a little bit of a joke and pushing it with Olivia Nuzzi because I can't stand her. But, you know, I went to, you know, as I said to people, and I
mistake, and that's
I couldn't stand her long before that, though. She was part of you know, it was like watching the Mean Girls Club. And please, folks, don't take that as a misogynistic remark, because there's a Mean Boys Club there too. And it's all these young hot shots who, like, went to Ivy League schools. And I went to school with some of these people. So I say constantly, I'm not proud of it. I don't brag about it, but that's how I know them. You know, there are 2 New York Times reporters right now, one of whom I went to high school with and used to hang out with, and another one I babysat for. And both of them, David Leonhardt and Nicholas Confessori, are people who often, I don't know what the hell they're talking about when they're writing. But, you know, they went to Princeton and Yale. And I mean, it's just a whole different sort of fabric of who these people are. They're just looking for their next higher gig, their next office space, their next... you know, will they get a contract with MSNBC, a book deal from talking to Trump? That's not what real journalists do. That's not what you did, and that's the problem.
I wish which is why the Washington Post's failure to acknowledge the realities of this election and did not endorse a candidate really was upsetting to me. And I go back to Ben Bagdickian, who was, again, one of my mentors, wrote me when I went to jail because I wouldn't give up a confidential source. I didn't know Ben, and he wrote me a really nice letter, which I still
Did you go to jail in Kentucky?
No, brother, Texas, 4 times.
Oh, because I spent a night in jail in Kentucky, and it's a story I love to tell, but another time.
I spent a night in jail in Kentucky. It was the longest year of my life. I'm telling you, tough room. Anyway, so Ben said this, and I quote specifically from him, quote, "Never forget that your obligation is to the people. It is not at heart to those who pay you or to your editor or to your sources or to your friends or to the advancement of your career. It is to the public." Man, that brings goosebumps to me even as I say it.
Me too.
That's, to me, is what journalism is all about. And when people talk about independent journalism today, I first ask them, where's your copy editor? If we're spouting opinions, this is media. It's not journalism. This is opinion. And if you want to be a fact provider, at least have a copy editor over your shoulder, or a city editor, someone who's questioning your grammar, your facts, and your content. Where did you get that quote? How do you know this? I'm going to edit this out because it's your opinion. I ran newspapers, and I would have reporters come up to me and go, "This is what I think." And I go, "Fuck you. I don't care what you think. I barely care what I think. What do you know? Go get me facts."
That's the question always. What do you know?
Yeah, and we don't do that anymore. And some of the new journalists
listen, like even I have to say, I don't mean to cut you off, but like I have always been, when I've written, I've always been an opinion writer. Okay, I never was a real journalist as you were. All right, I wrote an opinion, and even in that realm, I saw the change in guard over a number of different cycles to where, honestly, what I wrote was basically no longer edited. Nobody fact checked. Nobody cared. I could have made up that I was like the new king of Scotland, and they would have left it in there. I wrote columns for UPI, the service, obviously. I wrote, that was my first column ever, was for them, but then the Reverend Sung Young Moon took over, and it became a less desirable place to be, and more propagandish. I wrote for Kegel cartoons, and they allowed me to have a syndicated column and then I wrote for The Guardian and The Daily Beast. And there are some terrific people along the way, terrific editors. I had Noah Shackman, who actually, again, I went to high school with him. He's one of the good ones who came out and did right by the profession, and he ended up at Rolling Stone and all of that. He was one of my editors at the Daily Beast. Mike Tomasky, another terrific writer as far as I'm concerned, but I can't say that about everywhere I was. There were people who just didn't edit and didn't care, and they wouldn't bother. There was the fact checking got less and less. So it's opinion writers, you're still supposed to be, as you said, rely on fact. I can have an opinion looking at those facts, whether I think that's acceptable or not. The economy went up whatever percent. Is that good or bad, in my opinion? The fact is we grew at whatever percent. But I still would have to rely on facts. Towards the end, I haven't written a column for about regular one. I've written some guest ones for about 3 or 4 years, busy with, I wrote ads for Biden in 20 and then got into some of this YouTube stuff and other stuff with the Democratic Party. But my point is simply that as time went on, even that suffered to the point of where opinion writers write all sorts of garbage. And there have been a number of controversies over this, right? I can't think of the dude's name. Right? Was it Brett Stevens, who wrote for the New York Times and basically, made up some things about climate change that weren't true, and nobody had fact checked him? This is the kind of stuff that goes on.
The biggest problem we have in what's going on today is simply a lack of gravitas and a lack of understanding of what it is that we do. And we don't have anybody. There's no checks and balances built in because we're so small. The constriction in this industry has created an environment where we're just producing entertainment instead of facts. And that's until Cliff, everything you're talking about, all of that, the roots of all of that. Well, Sinclair that was allowed because of Ronald Reagan.
Do you know why I put that up there, Brian? Because the only time I've ever been paid regularly as a pontificator, if you will, on TV was the 2004 election, Kerry, versus Bush, where Sinclair, still in Washington, paid me to be the liberal. They didn't even hide it. Cliff, you're the liberal analyst. So it was me against whoever the host was. and I took it as a challenge and had fun with it. But it was me against whoever the host was, and Armstrong Williams, who you may remember eventually was outed for taking money from the Bush administration to write great things about Leave No Child Behind, the education plan. Like, it took $250,000 to write stuff for them, other stuff. I mean, he, worked with the Smith brothers at Sinclair. They sent a limo to get him on election night. I swear I drove my old beat up Subaru there. Like, the differences, were stark. And already you could see it. And now Sinclair, God, they own, I don't know how many different, they own one of the stations here in Cincinnati. And that's what I mean. Like, that's more of the sort of stuff that's going on with media monopolies, and especially when they're right wing.
I call them vulture capital groups. That, there's Gannett, there's Sinclair. Gannett owns television and newspapers. Then the Alden Group, which owns a couple hundred newspapers. There were limits on this. Every place I've ever worked at has been bought out or closed, and the staffs have been skeletonized. And one of the reasons why I got particularly upset with Jeff Bezos' editorial about why he didn't endorse it, he said something to the effect that, no one in Pennsylvania is going to decide who to vote for based on what we write. Well, you've just told me how irrelevant you are then, because when done correctly, endorsements are key. Now, the Courier-Journal would endorse, and here's how they would do it. And even people who hated them, and they endorsed both people, Republicans and Democrats, but they did it because they brought you in front of an editorial board. They interviewed you. They did opposition research on you, and then they vetted you. And so even if you hated the Courier-Journal, if you got endorsed by them, you put that in your political advertisements. Because
I always thought they, as somebody who met my wife working against Mitch McConnell in Kentucky in 2002, which is how one of the ways I ended up living in Cincinnati. We went back to DC for a while and then ended up here because family here and what have you. I mean, I was back then very impressed by both the Courier. I mean, Kentucky had two terrific papers, in the Herald Leader and
yeah. But when they sold to Gannett in the 80s, it's no coincidence that the rise of Mitch McConnell occurs after the sale of the Courier to Gannett, because they ceased doing that.
Now you're worried about your business interests, and you're no longer just worried about being a journalist. Yeah. Were you at either of those papers?
I was at the Courier-Journal in 84 and 85.
All right, we're gonna have to have a conversation off air because a family member was very high up there, but not the kind of thing I'm going to expose out here and get them in any trouble for being related to me.
That could be a bad thing.
Well, yeah, I once showed my nipple on here, and some folks encouraged me to do an OnlyFans, and so I thought, hey, I work out, if that could be part of another revenue-generating opportunity, then it's even easier for. In all seriousness, though, like even this market, we had the Cincinnati Post that shut down, right? Like the Cincinnati Enquirer ends up being what's left. They've now become literally like a pamphlet. I mean. Again, like it has to be nonprofits. Is I think one part of it. It would be what I would think to step in, so that we know it's not about profit anymore. To have some. I mean, again, why the Philadelphia Inquirer was the only newspaper to call on Trump to drop out after the debate against Biden for being a quote serial liar, and did not call on Biden to drop out, was maybe because the Philadelphia Inquirer is owned by a private foundation and didn't care. They're not a corporate entity that gives a crap about that. So to me, they became I told everybody, unsubscribe from the Post and the New York Times, subscribe to the Philadelphia Inquirer. They are the most reliable. If you're going to subscribe to mainstream media, they became the most reliable. And then I was incredibly impressed. You may have seen it, Brian. I don't even know who owns the Cleveland Plain Dealer, but their editor, Chris Quinn, wrote this long letter when people got mad at him and said, listen, one of the two candidates tried to overthrow an election. One of the two candidates didn't accept, and this is when Biden was still in, didn't accept the results. We are not going to treat them as the same. When Joe Biden deserves criticism, I will be out here giving him criticism. But we are going to cover them as they are. We're not going to pretend they're two sides of the same coin. And those are the only two newspapers. I'm sure there are some others, ProPublica, but they're nonprofit. I'm sure there are some other city newspapers around the country maybe are independent and did better, but those are the only two. So I immediately subscribed to those two, and I'm unsubscribed from the New York Post. I'm sorry, never was subscribed to them. The New York Times, the Washington Post, and those guys, because I want to support at least the few that are doing the right thing, But you tell me, because I agree.
I'll be taking up a collection at my church this week to buy the Courier Journal and the Los Angeles Times. We'll start there. We can rebuild. We have the technology.
Let's do a GoFundMe. Let's. Okay, so in series,
if I had known that the Times was that cheap or the Courier I could get that cheap, I'd have saved a long time ago, because you've got to build up. And it's got to be from the community newspapers. It's got to be. And listen, if you're a newspaper today, folks, welcome to reality. You're just not a newspaper. You're an online streaming service. You're a podcast. You're a television station. You're a radio station. Give it up. You publish. You are a media entity which publishes on multiple platforms. And if you do your job right as a newspaper, it enhances.
That's how you can make. That's how you can make revenue. Yeah.
The written word is still king. And here's the reason why. I can walk into a court of law and I can hold up this newspaper clipping from 30 years ago, still says the same thing, still has the same sources, it is etched in paper or in stone. I can go to the internet and hack anything. And in a court of law, finite rules. So the finite edition of a newspaper. I've seen 1850. I've got copies of newspapers that are now history from 1850.
Oh my God! When you look back at those,
yeah.
So I have to ask if you can throw it in there. I like to see what folks. Regina Gavin, who you say our local newspaper died. I'm interested which one that is. If you want to throw that in the comments, it's happened to so many newspapers.
There are huge SWAT. There are 45% of the counties in this country do not have a local media source. Do not have it. They've died on the vine.
Well, New Orleans, right? Like at this point, they only have the Picayune Times on weekends, right? Like they stopped publishing during the week.
The government has killed newspapers. It's the slap legend. For example, they took away, you used to have to publish in a newspaper public notice and service ads. Government's tried to get rid of them, saying, look, we can publish on our website. Folks, we have websites. The difference is that we are independent of the government and can hold them accountable. You cannot trust everything you see on a government website, because
also it's a form of revenue that they kill you by stealing, I would assume.
They view it as a cost-cutting measure. But the fact of the matter is, it doesn't cost them that much, except for the fact that it costs them the ability to dictate to you what it is that they're doing. Local, state, and federal governments have determined that it's better to keep goes back to George Carlin. Think of how stupid the average person is and realize half of them are stupider than that.
I swear I quoted that line last night. That's probably that's a top 5 George Carlin line that explains us.
And they keep you in the dark so they can keep running away with the cash. And it's advantageous to them to do it. They've had 40 years of supply side economics that proves it. And if you don't get it, you're not going to get it.
Yeah, Mikhail Spacco has that here about classified ads, another way that they just Craigslist kill the revenue source.
That's not, and Michael, I know there was some revenue from classified ads. The biggest source of revenue from subscriptions is from display advertising. Those are still valuable because the way you sell them with national ads and large ads is you put them online as well. There is money to be made, and there's still money to be made classified advertising online. What newspapers fail to realize that they are the local clearinghouse. Hey, I live in New Orleans. Where's the best place to go for pizza? Hey, I need to sell a piece of property.
Right.
Don't go to Craigslist. Go to my local newspaper. We lost that. And
yes, when the Gannettes and the people start taking over, there's no local flavor anymore. There's no. Okay, so many trends have gone in the wrong direction here, and we've talked about it, from Reporters Without Gravitas, and obviously that's a symptom of folks who are coming out are coming out young. Older folks may not want to do it because they're not paying as much, and younger folks want to like build a name for themselves because they want to be that important person that gets the contract with the cable news station and all the other crap. And there's all these negative trends that you talk about with government. All right, so now we're in the perfect world, let's call it Karem world, where what you do caroms around. I'm kidding. That's just a bad joke. What you do, though, will redounds to our favor. How about that? And leads to newspapers and other forms of media coming back to life. Specifically, what do you do if like a certain other person, you're a dictator for a day? What would you do that would bring back our media? When you talked about the fairness doctrine. Okay, from that, what would you do in today's media environment?
I would bust up media monopolies, and diversity of ownership is the only way to go about it. Put more reporters on the ground, more boots on the ground, so that we can cover things that are going on. I'd subsidize the media with tax breaks, and I would also subsidize it with there are different ways to subsidize for-profit media. I would invest in nonprofit media, but it's got to be a combination of both. And at the end of the day, if you're going to do nothing else, you've got to reintroduce the fairness doctrine and make it applicable to social media. In my
social media, cable, anything that it wouldn't have in the past.
Everything that broadcasts. At the end of the day, the biggest challenge to accurate factual information on social media are those who post comments and pretend to post real photos and news behind a false name, behind a handle, behind an anonymous handle. Like Robbie blows it up, whatever, 25, and or Sarah Bernhardt 37, whatever.
No, you shouldn't. I agree.
You have to be accountable for. I am accountable. I am not on social media as anything other than my name. I do that voluntarily, and everyone else should be accountable for what they say. So you cannot throw these anonymous bombs, disinformation from behind a bush. And also, by the way, that gets rid of a lot of the bot farms, and that's why
I was going to say
get made, because people, they want the profits. The large companies.
This is how you know how important it is. I brought it up with Tony Michaels, who I was on his show, and then he was on here right before. And this is why I brought it. This is why this is how you know how important it is to these guys, that people don't know the truth, because Republicans, the right in general, know that people have accurate facts, they will lose almost every time. I mean, yes, some exceptions in about 15 very rural states in this country, but in most places they will lose. And here's what it is, which is this whole, well, hold on one sec. Even in rural states, you're right. This whole sort of assault on leading with the word censorship. Oh, you're going to censor us and censor social media. The fact that JD Vance just threatened, the EU over them censoring Elon Musk tells you everything you need to know, which is they know that if they cannot have, because the EU, they've got more tougher laws than us. And again, that's why I've said you can be a democracy. In Germany, if you show a Nazi symbol, you go to prison. In the United Kingdom, I like to point out that when that lunatic went and murdered innocent black shoppers in Buffalo, based on white replacement theory, the only other person who got busted besides the murderer was a British national living in England who encouraged him to go do it, because in the United Kingdom, that's encouraging violence, and you are not allowed to do that. But we, of course, don't care here in this country. So to me, the only way you can handle this and clean up social media is if you start with some of what you said and enacting some of those laws, names behind it. There's no reason. You don't even have to get into the First Amendment when it comes to banning Russian bots. Russians have no First Amendment rights here. And bots certainly don't, but neither do any of, there's no reason why Twitter should not be massively regulated to the point where when we within a certain number of months, the way the French do a blackout, 48 hours, 72 hours before the election of media, because they don't want it being manipulated, however long we choose to do it, maybe forever. But I'm sorry, foreign entities coming in and sharing disinformation, they don't have a First Amendment right to do that here. So they should be the easiest to remove, and it's ridiculous that we don't even try. And that's what they want to stop the EU from doing, and that's why JD Vance is threatening them, because they're acting in Putin's interests here, because they can only win with disinformation and lies. To me, again, it is not, you talking about, I mean, we can all argue over inciting riot, yelling fire in a crowded theater, how that's interpreted. Different Supreme Courts interpret things different ways. But I'm sorry, if you convince a healthy person not to take a vaccine. I'm sorry?
That is a Supreme Court decision. I am quoting. You cannot do it.
No, I know that. So to me, you know, my understanding of it is it has to be very specific. Well, I'm sorry, if you're convincing somebody, a healthy person, to not get a vaccine by lying to them about it, and they die, I believe you should be held liable. If you are, I mean, I'm sorry, there's free speech to a point where you are harming and putting other people in danger. If you incite a mob against other people, if you encourage someone to go do a school shooting or a shooting up in Buffalo, that is no longer free speech. It should not be. And in the past, there are times when it wasn't. But right now, just the way we've turned the Second Amendment into something that it never was, this joke of an individual right instead of a well-regulated militia meant to stop, you know, internal dissent from a Shays rebellion or an attack by the British, they turned it into some individual right to have almost any gun you want. Even Warren Burger laughed at that and said it was ridiculous. They've brought these amendments to the extremes to where it helps the right wing, and they benefit.
They're lying. They are simply fucking lying. This is a lie.
Yes.
It's not censorship to make speech responsible. You have free speech, but you also have a responsibility. Your responsibility is to promote the facts and label your opinions as thus. And you cannot lie to people and tell them that a fiction is a fact unless it is satire. And it is, you know, if that's different. I can come out and say, you know, Donald Trump screws chickens. And here's, you know, the show, and then we make a movie of it, and it's that, and it's clearly.
But it's true, he does.
And
I know. Yeah.
But the point is you cannot lie to people, and then if you're unable to tell the difference between a lie and a fact, who does that benefit? Well, it benefits those in control. And so you've got to be able to factually tell. You've got to be able to tell what the facts are. So when you're asking people to be responsible, that's not censorship. That's maturity and responsibility. If I have a fact, for example, I have evidence that shows that Dow Chemicals has done something illegal, and my government keeps me from producing that fact, that's censorship. If I tell you that Dow Chemical has done something wrong and they have not, that's called libel or slander. And it is actionable except on social media because we we put things out there anonymously. That is the problem. Turkeys, man. Yeah, well, you know,
thank you. I'll say it quickly, Mr. WW. Thank you for being a member for a month. I should have having this amazing conversation with Brian. I forgot to encourage folks to please become members of YouTube to get the extra content. Any shout outs are appreciated. Absolutely subscribe. In a little bit, I've held Brian here for a while, and I can talk to Brian forever, so I'm gonna leave it a little bit up to him. But when he's gone, we're gonna make sure to tell you everywhere you can find him, and then I'll answer a couple questions as I normally do, and we all ride on into the sunset, just like John Wayne. I don't do the impression as well. I can't do it. Shit. I can do a pretty good Southern accent if I want to, but I don't know if I want to get into that right now.
Well, okay, so horn layer. That's not too, and I can do the long, drawn out Georgia accent. Well, wow. I can do that Tennessee.
Wow, you got it. You got it there.
Something like that, but
yeah, you sure got that.
I'm telling you.
So we know what we need to do now. Oh, I'm sorry. Now I'm stopping you from doing the. I went to a party where they had a guy dressed up as Rodney Dangerfield. I mean, he looked like him. It was scary. They hired him, and he just walked around and did Rodney Dangerfield jokes, and he did them, you know, with the whole thing, and he was so good. I should have gotten video. Well, it was excellent.
That is the one story I will tell, and this is my fault from the first Trump administration. For the first 4 or 5 months of the Donald Trump administration, he didn't talk to the press too much at all. He would walk out to the helicopter and wave, like all presidents do. We'd shout a question, and you know he hears us, and he would just wave and move on. So one day in March, of what was it, 20? He got in 2016. So in March of 2017.
17,
yeah. He's walking. He'd been in office since January. And then March is it's a brisk day in March. The wind's blowing. He walks out of the White House. He's got the white shirt, the red tie. It's flapping in the breeze, the dark suit, and his hair is kind of flying, and that belly sticking out. And for all the world, he looked to me like Rodney Dangerfield. So I was standing there. He's waving. People are shouting questions. He's ignoring them. And then I said, "Huh, Mr. President, it's a tough room. How you doing?" And he turns around and he goes, "Playboy, what do you got?" And so that started chopper talk, and the blame is on me because I did it.
I am so glad you did that. But that, even that's part of the whole thing. Again, man, there's a time. Who was it? Jack Germond, the late Jack Germond, wrote that book about hard drinking whiskey and whatever. I can't remember the name of it, but he sort of caught the essence of what journalists once were. More working and middle class, more hard hitting, hard drinking, which again, I leave up to them. Hard smoking, hard drinking. I do a bit of myself, not as much hard smoking. But you're in Kentucky. You better have good bourbon somewhere. There you go.
Drinking. So that's because I finished it. So
so now that I'm here, I've really in this area, I've taken up a love for bourbon, but I still. This doesn't come from my background. I grew up in New York City, but I'm a tequila guy through and through. So you get me some Patron on ice, and I'm a pretty happy man. And beer, of course, because beer is
on ice is my
God's gift to us, as Benjamin Franklin said.
I'll go for bourbon. I'm the bourbon man. I was
Mike,
one bourbon.
You know what? I've been on so much today. I was on with Hal Sparks for an hour earlier, and then I went on Tony Michael's show. Yeah, he's great. 15 minutes. And now with you, this is the first time I've actually had these things die on me, which is kind of cool. It means that we've been getting some shit done here today. So, all right, Brian. So what do we leave the people with? Is there hope? Can we resist? Are we gonna come back from this? Are we Rome circa AD 476 and screwed? What are we?
Screwed, blued, and tattooed with a little bit of hope on the side. I'm always hopeful. But the voting shows that the American people have spoken, and they're going to get what they wanted, good and hard. And all I can say is, I hope you get a good dose of Donnie.
Good, hard, and fast, baby.
Yeah,
just the way you like it.
A good dose of Donnie, and then you see what Donnie's all about. Because those of us who have covered him know. Now, I sincerely hope that 4 years from now, I can sit here and say, gosh, I was wrong, and he was the greatest president ever. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we'll be lucky. We have an existential threat for not only the United States, but the world. I think it's desperately dark times. But here's the thing, folks. If you're going to give up and walk away, you're part of the problem. You got to stay. The only way to face a bully is to punch him in the nose and stand your ground. So I ain't leaving X. I ain't leaving that. Now, they may not let me in the White House, and I'm pretty sure that they won't. I'm pretty sure
out of your own house. But,
I think they're going to limit I think, in all honesty, the hard pass that I have will be gone January 20th. But that doesn't mean I'm going to stop doing what I do, and I'm not going to stop trying to get sources, and I'm not going to stop reporting, and I'm certainly not going to stop telling you what I think of Donald Trump, who's a big piece of piling, steaming shit. And at the end of the day, Donald Trump is the greatest existential threat to humanity of my lifetime. Wait until they do what from day one, the roundups. Day two, they're going to get rid of. They're going to go back to patronage jobs and loyalty oaths from civil service. They're going to get rid of your Medicare. They're going to Project 2025, once enacted, is going to turn this country into a pariah. And folks, wake the fuck up. And Democrats, I don't care if I'm tired of hearing people blame Biden. I'm tired of hearing people blaming the Democratic Party. Get out and vote. You had a choice. We still don't in this country turn out 50% of the electorate. How in the hell?
And you know what the sad thing about it all is? And I said this when we were on for the last show, or a few shows ago. So you know what? I can actually say I got one prediction right. considering that how many before this election I did not get right, based on what had led me to write predictions the last couple of elections. But when the media did their thing, which pissed me off to no end because they do, and came out and CNN and all these folks were like, "Oh, a resounding win for Donald Trump," and I just was like, "You motherfuckers! You know what? You've got 18 million votes at that moment still left just in California. That's going to be a 60-40 Democratic proposition at least. You got votes left in Washington State, Oregon. You had all these. And now that they're all being counted and the race is getting closer and closer, it's even that much worse that people did not get out and vote, because this is going to be a 1-point race by the time we're done. I'm telling you right now, by the time we're done, Trump will have won the popular vote between 1 and 1.5 points. It was it'll be a 3 million or 2 million. It may only be a 2 million vote difference. We could have won this thing.
And Cliff, let's be honest. It affected the congressional and Senate races. It destroyed the blue wall, and it's even fewer votes than that. I saw an analysis in the 7 swing states. It's a difference of
275,000 votes in different. Yep.
Yes. That's all it would have taken. So if you had to hold your nose and go vote for, and part of the problem is, look, he pulled up roughly the same numbers as he did last time, roughly. So where were the Democratic voters? Don't tell me that.
That's what I'm saying.
Don't give me the same garbage that the Trump people said that, was hacked and it was all that. You got to turn out the votes, man. You got to be there. You got to.
I agree. Listen. There's the propaganda, right-wing media, which needs to be solved with an ample response from the left. Buffett, Bloomberg, all these people who claim to care about things like climate and women's health. We're waiting because no one paid. I'm at 93,000 subscribers. No one's giving me a cent. Well, no, you kind folks have given me shout outs and whatever, but nobody has written me a big check yet, and I don't expect one. And if I were on the right, I'd be like, I mean, come on, have you seen what? That's what
you
seen how Charlie Kirk sounds? You seen how Charlie Kirk sounds and looks? They gave him a lot of money. I mean, come on. So we need to do that.
I picked the wrong way to stop drinking.
There you go. Yeah, I'll have mine ready. Oh, I got some rum.
Wait a minute. I've got to ask you, is that Nils Lofgren behind you? That picture?
This?
Yeah.
We got Bruce. That's a great book on Bruce by Peter Ames Carlin.
It kind of looked. Well, I couldn't see it at first, and it looks like.
No, Niles is. I love Niles. I know him a little bit from Twitter, but we got stuff on beer. We got the art of war. We got Mickey Mantle. The important stuff is behind me.
His brother Mike played with me on stage. The Lofgren brothers are great together, and they're from Maryland. And for those who don't know, Nils Lofgren got famous by playing a guitar on a trampoline in suburban Maryland, and that's how he, and then he went on to fame and fortune, but they're a lot of fun, and I couldn't.
Oh yeah, awesome! He and his wife Amy are really not. I've talked to them; they're incredibly nice people too, like just humble, nice people.
Yeah,
So folks who
rock and roll, so I'm with them,
Well, there you go. So folks who've asked, they're like, and I put this up here. Ask Brian to come back as much as possible. Of course, I will. Great guest. So what I'm thinking of doing at this point is. There's I'm a writer. There's a little alliteration here, but I think we may I'm doing 4 of these a week. We may do a Media Monday where I have somebody on who's a brilliant media type like Brian. There aren't any days of the week that start with R that work out for me. So, because I could just do rock and roll Thursday if I want. But that's the other thing is I'm lucky enough to know a few terrific folks like Niles out there, like Serge Tankian of System of a Down, who I worked with. He's Armenian American on a number of projects. And some other people I really like. Jim Williams, thank you so much for the $20 super chat. I really appreciate it, seriously. And so it may have a series of things that I call people cooler than me. And it'll be some rock stars, some great media folks, some great, a few people I've met in the acting profession, a guy named Mark Hamill, who I'm sure you guys know from Twitter, who I got to know through some work I did on gun safety because he is passionate about it. Mike McKeon, another great guy I'd love to have on. A few of those types of folks. So we're gonna keep. I want to have interesting people on here that you're familiar with, you've heard of, you've seen their work, that they're top notch, and obviously they believe in good things. What should we leave? We'll leave people with. I think that was a good one. I mean, I'm the same way as you. I always say I'm an optimist, but I'm a realist. Everybody needs to get the hell out there. Look, there will be special elections coming up in no time, in whether it's state house, state senate, your local mayor, whatever. Go out and overwhelm them and vote. We did that after the first time Trump ran and won. Get out there and we'll try to share information. Brian and he'll going to tell you in a second where you can find him. But you know where you can find me here. We're going to tell you the various things you need to know about. We're going to find out more about exactly what went wrong. We have some ideas, and how to do better. But man, from signing petitions to going and showing up at offices, there's just so many ways to donating to organizations.
Vote. Just vote.
Well, do that too. But I'm pretty sure everybody here voted who's sitting here right now, Brian. It's more like we all need to talk to the people in our lives that didn't vote.
This country didn't vote, and some of them are some of the very same people who bitch. My grandmother used to say, "If you don't vote, don't bitch," and she was right, and I agree with that. And there was Carl Jacobson. I guess I saw a comment about Grin. If you have a Grin album, man, that's worth something. That's the Nils Raw and back in the day. And one of the I've got a couple of those collector items. It's pretty cool. So
pretty cool. Well, my son's a musician too, so we'll have that conversation also at some point. A rock singer,
rock and roll band, me brother. So rock and roll.
That's right. So this is important for people to know. For example, Abigail Spanberger will be running in a lean Democratic, but sadly, that was the beginning of the end when we saw some of those Northern Virginia counties come in. And I looked at them and I was like, that was my first holy shit moment when I saw Kamala Harris. Because if you know what to look for, and you look at a couple of those counties and she's underperforming Biden by 8 points, 10 points, I was like, God, I hope that they screwed something up in Virginia. But it always ends up being representative, always across the country. And we can win. I mean, again, there's no reason we had won 4, I think, races in a row for governor in Virginia before Youngkin won. We won, as Tony pointed out earlier, Youngkin ran so we could eliminate abortion in Virginia, and guess what? We won the state house and the state senate. We could win there. That's next.
Question. Cliff, let me ask you a question before we get out of here. Who do you think is a rising star in the Democratic Party? I think Harris is probably done because she couldn't beat Trump, and he's a convicted felon.
Yeah.
But who do you think is a rising star in the Democratic Party?
No, again, I think Kamala's terrific. I just, maybe eventual Supreme Court justice, maybe, but I just don't, we don't do that.
President.
We're not Trumpers. So no, a few of them are Congress. First of all, Abigail Spanberger, who has a terrific background, I believe in intelligence and military. She wins that governor's race in Virginia. You'll be hearing a lot about her. I think that, look, people have talked about Newsom for years. He's got money. He's got good hair. He comes from a huge state. Swalwell, who's incredibly talented. There are a lot of really talented folks in California. Ted Lieu is incredibly talented. I would look to Jamie Raskin, who's incredibly talented. Somebody here is Jasmine Crockett. Ironically, I love Jasmine Crockett. And if you've been to my channel, I've highlighted her taking down Republicans a number of times. Dan Goldman too. I think she may be too young, ironically, at this point. I don't know if she's of age to run for president. But the thing is, we do need people with experience. It does matter. And Dan Goldman.
Else.
Go for it.
I think the Democratic Party has to admit that it's not as progressive. America is not as progressive as the Democratic Party. So I think we're all coming to this conclusion. I think you're going to have to find someone, and here's my recommendation for someone to look at. I think at the end of the day, you've got to look to someone who can win in a red state. And there's one guy I think is really good.
Andy Beshear. He not only won in Kentucky, he outdid polls, won by 5 or 6 points, won Appalachian counties. Look, folks, I'm gonna say this, and again, I think we have to.
If you're going to invest somebody, invest in him.
I agree. We have to have honest conversations, and so I'm going to be honest with you. As many of you know, because I don't hide it, I joke about it quite often, self-deprecating jokes are the part of the game here. I am what you would call a person originally of Jewish persuasion. Even though I haven't been in a temple in the better part of 30 years, my family, none of that stuff. I'm just going to say this, like, I hate to say this, but we may need to just nominate a white Christian male who can win in the South. I mean, again, look, polls, and again, if people want to get mad at me, they can get mad at me, but like, I want to win. And in the end I would say this, in 2008, Barack Obama and John McCain were tied until the bottom fell out of the economy. I wanted to believe the best in our country. I thought Kamala Harris, no problem. But after Hillary and Kamala and after Barack Obama, when they started attacking him, only got 50%, did 50% as well in his reelection as he did in his first election because of the birth certificate. I hate it. I hate it that this is the way it has to be. Because as somebody who's Jewish, would I like to see a Jamie Raskin?
Reality, though, look. I
live in reality.
I'm a Catholic, right? I gave up Catholicism for Lent. Let's be real. The people that come from the Church of the Waving Hands and Six Flags Over Jesus are not, and there are many of them. They're not going to vote. And if you want to appeal to people that don't vote, Mazel Tov. Good luck. Good, God bless you. But let's talk about reality, the people that do vote. The Donald Trump Republicans, remember what James Carville said, I don't like what they stand for, but I admire their work ethic. I'm not talking about a boring white man. I'm talking
That's why I put that up there. Frankie, I'm going to let you.
Elected. If you
listen, Bill Clinton was a white man, but he was anything but boring. He may have been a little bit too interesting.
Have sexual relations with that woman.
I mean, I'm sorry, but that's again, these are conversations we have to be able to have, and you have to all know, by knowing me and knowing Brian, you have to understand the perspective we're coming from here, which is if it doesn't help us if we sit here and we say we must elect this person, but then they can't get elected because our country is fucked. And in the end, we all lose our rights. Like, as much as I'd love there to be somebody Jewish on the ticket, at this point in time, I think it's harmful and I don't want to see it. And I'm just saying, like, this is where Andy Bashir can go into places in the South and he can in the Midwest and win. So it doesn't have to be somebody boring. Bill Clinton, again, you would have wished Bill Clinton was a little bit more boring. That was my first campaign in '96 for Bill Clinton on his polling team. But again, your vice president, I think, can be more, and hopefully will be, somebody who will be much more diverse. But we have evidence now, and I don't know what to tell you. But a lot of this country isn't where we are.
It's not a zero-sum game, and you cannot impose your will upon those who do not agree with you. The politics is the art of compromise. It's the art of half a loaf. And if you aren't willing to compromise to reach a location, you're going to get screwed. And folks, you got screwed. And folks, 4 years from now, I hope and pray that we're sitting here going, wow, we were all wrong. He deserves to be on Mount Rushmore. Now, I don't think that's going to happen. And I think we're going to get screwed, blued, and tattooed. And hopefully we convince some people to move further away from the right. But there is a vast number of people in the middle who are, look, they believe, you believe what you want to believe, I believe what I want to believe, but they're not going to vote for someone that we would vote for. So if you want to get them in the mix, you're going to have to concede a little bit. And if you have to hold your nose to get a step forward rather than 3 steps back, hold your damn nose. You got to keep moving forward. And don't refuse don't say we refuse to go back, but not go forward. You're standing your ground. Mazel tov, good for you. But you're getting knocked off your pedestal by those who are, look, never, ever underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups. And this election.
And when they get in groups, they get dumber. It's groupthink. They start, I just have to say, after this election, okay, I want to elect somebody that will move the country forward in 4 years, assuming we have an election. So that's the place.
We have a world,
right? That's the place we've gotten ourselves. So please, let's not. I mean, again, for me, I was excited, so excited. I had to watch in, my wife's eyes again as a hugely talented woman lost to a ridiculously inferior man so far below her he couldn't see her, even if he stared up at the eclipse. All right.
I have a granddaughter, Cliff, who was born 3 weeks ago. My granddaughter is.
I didn't even know that. Congrats, man.
Thanks. My granddaughter is born with fewer rights today than her mother was 30 years ago. Now, put that on. And I look at her eyes, and I'm not fighting this fight for me. I'm fighting it for her. And it is abhorrent to me what is going on in this country. But if it takes someone who I look at her and I go, I hope she can be president of the United States someday. God, I at this point hope she still has the ability to vote when she's of voting age. You're going to have to make a small step to get there. And if you don't like the fact that it's a white man who gets you there, or a black man who gets you there, or a brown man, or a red man, or a green man, I'm sorry. But you've got to go forward. And you're not going to go forward as long as we're sitting there demonizing. Let them demonize you as much as they want, and send somebody into their midst that will, because Donald Trump convinced them. I want you to understand what Donald Trump did. He convinced a vast number of people who feel they aren't being listened to that he is a blue-collar worker.
I know.
And he was exploiting them. So why not send someone who really has those roots into that midst and get this train back on the track? I'll leave it with that.
I mean, that's and I'm just finishing with that. If I'm of the belief that things have changed enough, I will support anybody. I want there to be a woman president. I want there to be a gay president. I want everyone to have their chance. I have come to the conclusion I do not believe at this moment in our history, with the right-wing disinformation being what it is and our populace being as stupid as they are, that I think that I'm not sure that we can win in that. Or we have to get, to get lucky a little bit the way with the economy crashing when it did in 2008. And the most important thing is that we elect somebody that pushes us forward and supports, liberal values as far as I'm concerned. So that's where I've got two boys. I mean, I have granddaughters, but I've got two boys who are teenagers, and I don't want them growing up in this America. Right now, they're going to have to for a few years, but I don't want this to be their lives in America. And I'm sorry, I don't care whatever it takes, man. And I'm willing to give up somebody of my background because I don't give a damn. I only give a damn that somebody who has my beliefs and your beliefs wins. So that's where I am. Where can they find you, Brian?
Well, you can find me wherever fine podcasts are sold. It's called Just Ask the Question. And you can also catch me on, I have a twice a week, I think, with Salon. I pen a column for salon.com. You can also see me on television, wherever. And of course, the book is called Free the Press. And if you want to know the problems of the press after having been in it for 40 years, everyone is right. There is a problem, but I'm going to show you where the problem is and how to fix it.
Buy his book, support him any way you can, because again, he didn't get published by Regnery or Regnery, and they're not going to. And Heritage Foundation, Heritage Foundation isn't going to buy 500,000 copies to put it on the bestseller list. We have to, when we write books, right? I wrote one of those. Where is it? The Real McCain. Yeah, nobody bought a bazillion copies of that. I had to convince people to go buy it. So buy his book. Go read his columns at Salon. Salon shouldn't even be work for you, because Brian's one of the most, he's up there with me, like with Rex Hubke and Will Bunch. There's about 5 or 6 columnists out there right now I consider the gold standard, that are just the people that you have to read every week. And Brian's one of them. And then follow him on all the various Twitter, Blue Sky, wherever you're hanging your hat machines at this point.
I'm on all of them. I picked up several thousand on Blue Sky in the last week and lost several thousand on Twitter.
Really?
Yeah, every time I turn around, people are abandoning Twitter. I'm out of here, and it's turned into a troll nation. But I'm there for it because I got to tell you, I'm the sick SOB who reads all that shit from the Trumpers and just, I look at it as bad comedy. Some of these people should be up on stage doing, stand up because it's just bullshit. But I do like to know how they think. And honestly, Chip, honestly, Cliff, they don't think.
No, I mean, it's crazy.
Oh, and you can catch me on Mary Trump Media, the Nerd Avengers, and my show there is called Reverse Shot. So, and we just posted a new episode today on the YouTube channel. Just Ask the Question YouTube channel on Reverse Shot, where we turn the camera around and we show you the problems with media. So that's a new one, and love you to check that out.
All right. Thank you for being here, Brian. We'll continue to have the conversation here. I'd love for you guys to ask me a couple more questions. Although I'd say we've gone long as hell. I knew I could invite Brian on for 15 minutes and he'd be here an hour. That's what I love. There are predictable things about Brian Karem. That would be wonderful. I love you,
brother. Anytime you need me, I'm here.
I love you too, pal. Keep up. Please keep fighting for the Republic and such.
I keep trying, and I'm sorry. Chip Franklin called me right as we were talking, and I called you Chip instead of Cliff. So forgive me for that.
Dude, if you heard the number of things and you can think of them in your head that people called me that are close to Cliff when I was a kid, you know that Chip is just fine. So we're good.
All right, brother.
Seriously, take care, my man.
All right. Happy trails.
All right. Take care. So, guys, what's going on in the comments here? Benny Loco, are you mad at me? Am I being blocked everywhere? Or is this sick of it? Who's sick of it? What do we got going on? Anybody want to tell me? Because hopefully you're not blocking me everywhere. I mean, if you are, I guess it is what it is. Again, the conversation I just had with Brian, I mean, again, I know some people will get, oh, thank you, Benny. Okay. No, not me. Look, I didn't want to say what I had to say, but I've decided that I'm going to have difficult conversations with people, and we're supposed to all be allies. So you know what, guys? You should be giving me the benefit of the doubt if you know my background. I'm not just I haven't been a plant by Putin for 25 years. Right. I wrote a book on stuff. I wrote ads for Biden. I worked for, on one of the first people working on gun safety and beat the NRA for the first time on the floor of the Senate in 2009. The first time in 5 years they had lost a battle and whatever. I don't need to give you my resume. You know who I am. You've all seen me places. So if I'm telling you that I think that we may have to have a white, straight Christian male to beat Trump, I'm telling you this is a political. This is the way I'm looking at things politically. Do you think that doesn't sort of make me feel horrible that this is the country we are? I'm sitting here in a state that went from Terry S. Thank you for being a new member. Awesome. Others think about joining too, please. But you think how horrible I feel my county, Hamilton County here in Cincinnati went much more blue as it keeps doing. Thank God. We won a couple of big races we didn't have. Which is the prosecutor here, which is really important. I did work for the Innocence Project, and we had passed prosecutors that didn't give a damn if you were guilty or innocent. But do you think I want us to have to do this? But and I'm going to have other important conversations with you. We cannot get defined by fringe beliefs. That's not a fringe one, but that's just a matter of who we put forward in our country. We can't get defined by things, that it doesn't help the vast majority of us. We should be able to have conversations about things that sometimes are just not settled and not simple, and not be like, well, you said this. I agree with 99.9% of things you agree with, but I don't agree with you on that. Now I hate you and I'm never following you again. And I'm not saying you guys are doing that, but a lot of people on the left do that. In remembrance of Sick of It, the Tiny. Okay, so I'm glad. Thank you, JD Christie. And I'm glad that Sick of It, who clearly seems to be an enormous asshole, got kicked off of here. I don't want to have these conversations with you. I don't want to have them with. I don't think we should have to have them with anybody. I don't think most of these things that the right makes issues should be issues, right? But just the way I've told you, I would give anybody who's here at this point amnesty. We do have to have a border. Right? I mean, it doesn't have to be filled with nasty people with machine guns. It doesn't have to be filled with people that are cruel, like this Homan asshole that that Trump is going to put in. But that's sort of your answer to the question, isn't it? Is that if Kamala and they were pretty moderate on this issue, but if you respect that a country for its sovereignty has to control its borders, yeah, bad people can come in through borders. You have to control them. But my God, anybody who's trying to escape violence in Central America, trying to escape persecution, of course I'd let them in. I mean, if it's up to me, and make them go through a process, because everyone should have to go through a process. Okay, but we do have to have laws around that. That's just something else that we have to talk about. And I believe this is a conversation we need to have. And so I'm gonna have you right. I see what you're saying, Joe Destiny, and I think there's something to that. We had to have a better message, but again, when we came out and we let them back us into a corner and push us to where we support the few fringe positions, because almost everything we believe is supported by like 80% of the populace, right? Pro-choice, background checks for guns, climate, family medical leave, whatever. We get pushed into a corner when we're wasting our time arguing over, biological men running in women's races. Like, I don't even think this is something that we should be spending our time on. I mean, again, every person should be able to be who they want to be. Gay, straight, trans, black, white, brown. But we can't get defined on things where there, I believe, is real controversy and there are real conversations to be had. It's not about being who you are. It's about once you're entering certain competitions and whatever, well, that changes things, And I think these are the kinds of conversations we have to have. I'll tell you this, guys, I'm just going to throw this out there to you. I would have never, this isn't something that I would have done, but, I was recruited as a Division I sprinter to where I went to college. Okay. And I can tell you this right now that my times when I was running them, I probably wasn't even in the top 500 male sprinters, but I would have made the women's Olympics team. All right. Well, this is something that, a conversation has to be had about that and I don't think that doesn't make you a bigot. I mean, again, anybody should be able to be anybody they want to be. And I fully support that. 1,000,000,000%. Thank you for Canine Mutt for becoming a YouTube member. But let's not call people bigots because there is a legitimate conversation to be had around some things like competitions. All right. That's just another thing from here. When it came to our lack of messaging, look, that's it. We got defined. We're talking about 200 kids total in high school and college, 200 out of 300. Exactly. I agree, Cynthia. I'm with you. I don't think it's a big deal. Frankly, I wouldn't even have anything to do with it at all. But I also wouldn't say to people, you can't have a conversation about it. I mean, whoever those 200 people are, there are people running against them. There are people swimming against them. So if it's a conversation that we want to have, shouldn't that be okay to have that conversation? And then maybe we determine, hey, you know what? They should have the right to compete. But I don't think it makes you a bigot to just want to have that conversation. And I don't think it makes you a bigot to say, we desperately need to win because we can't be a fascist country. Okay, that's all I'm saying, guys. That's all I'm saying. I support everybody's right to be everything. I want there to be, in my perfect world, there'd never be a straight white Christian male president again. That I won't say that. That's not fair. There's some very good people that are straight white Christian males, but there would be everybody else would get the opportunity just as much as them. But the more important thing to me is winning, because when we don't win, look where we are right now. Now we're worrying about whether somebody's going to follow the Constitution or not. Now we're wondering about, someone like Brian Karem has to wonder about, is he going to end up, I mean, he's not talking about that stuff, but considering some of the questions he asked Trump, I mean, one of his questions ended up in a Jack Smith filing. Are they going to threaten him, come for him? Right? I don't know. But he may be nervous. The stuff I speak out about, I'm out here, man. I'm the only way I could change the way Donald Trump views me is if I were a sycophant and started saying, stuff from like the Manchurian Candidate. Donald Trump is the smartest, most wonderful, and I'm not doing that shit. So here it is. I have to have on my mind the next 4 years that somebody at the White House may come across something I've said and decide they don't like me. And God knows. That's all I'm trying to say, people, is I think we need that. I think there are a lot of things we all agree 1,000,000,000% on everybody's personal rights. When those rights then have an effect on other people, I think conversations need to be had. It's the same way I feel about guns. When people say, well, that's my personal right. It's not your personal right when you can take an assault weapon into a school. No. Well, vaccine, that's my personal right. No, it's not. It's not your personal right when you can start a smallpox-like epidemic. When your personal rights, we have a common square, the public good. That's what democracy is. And when we get to a point where an individual is doing anything, no matter what it is, that affects other people, well, then I believe we need to have conversations about that. That's all I'm saying here. What do you guys have? I do not Deborah Cornett. I do not vote for a candidate based on man, I can't read. Let me try that again. Do not vote for a candidate for elected office based upon their religious affiliation. That's mostly irrelevant to me. It's completely irrelevant to me. I don't care what it is. Hey, Cliff, what is your best 100-meter time? Just curious from a fellow sprinter. All right, Sheldon. These days, at the age of 52 is probably not impressive. My best time when I was in college was I hit in the 100, which was the shorter the race. I'm not a tall guy, and I have a very quick start. So the shorter the race, the better. So 100 was my second best after the 55-meter. 100, I hit 10.7 something. I think was my fast 10.77, I want to say. Most of the time I ran about a 10.9 or so. And then in the 200 meter, I ran, I think I got 22.9. I wasn't as quick in that. And 55 is where I was able to be ranked. That I hit, I want to say I hit 6.4. Does that sound right? Something like that. It's been a long time, but yes. That was a different me, young and strong, no aches and pains anywhere, no lower back pain. Those were good days. Looking forward to listening to you on Seska too. Claire Wood, thank you. I was on with Bob recently. There may be an announcement coming up there about me doing a little bit more on Bob's show, but that's really all I can give away. What else we got? Eastern cross country, my knees are shot. Cynthia, yeah, I understand. My knees feel it now. I'm 67 and was slightly slower. Well, if you started getting into the longer races, Sheldon, I got my ass handed to me. They would punish me by making me run the 400. And what I would do is I'd start off on the first 200 in like 23 and a half seconds, and then I'd come in 30 because I die at the 300 mark. The people who are taller than me, I'm about 5'8", they'd start like moving, their legs their longer legs would catch me when you get beyond the 200. So my 200 time was good. My 100 time was pretty good. My 55 was really the one that got me recruited. But now, I'd pull a hamstring if I tried to run the 55 at that speed. I still try. I still work out and do all that. Try to run with my kids. But man, my older son, when he beat me the first time, that was tough to take a couple of years ago. I think it was right about when I turned 50, so it's like a double blow. I'm like, as long as you're not putting them on the back of a brown man's neck that shows them your knees will be just fine. Yes, I think you're making a reference to certain cops, and yes, wow, Jasmine Crockett is 43, so now I feel stupid. She looks really young, and that's compliment, I think, still, right? She's brilliant. I love her. She's one of the people, probably one of the 5 people I featured the most on my channel for taking apart Republicans. So I'm sorry. I was off. She could run. And again, she'll, by 4 more years, she'll have a lot more experience. I'd love her again as a VP candidate. And if I believe that things have changed, I'll feel differently. But I want to win. Sheldon Hughes, thank you for becoming a member. Now we can be sprinting buddies. I don't know where you live, but if you can get yourself over to the Queen City here, then we can do our thing. Governor of Texas. Oh, I'd love if Jasmine Crockett were governor of Texas. We've got to take Texas back. That was depressing too. How red Ohio, Florida, and Texas got. I'm hoping that's not a thing. Please come on our show, 21st Century Suffragettes. Cliff, Benny Loco, thank you. Give me an invite. You shoot me an invite, and I will join you. You know, it may take a little planning. You know, things are busy with the 4 live streams, and I'm doing a Hal's show on Monday, and I do Stephanie's show once a month, and I do a half hour on Tony's show every Thursday, and 15 minutes every other day to promote this because I'm right after him, and we'll make it happen. You just give me a little time ahead of time. I'll go on any show. You know, let's see what else we got. Any other questions? My gosh, we're almost at the 2-hour mark. That would be let's see if we can make it to 2 hours, because that is going to be a record for me. I think 1 hour and 50. Thank you, Benny. We'll be in touch, definitely. Do it, Cliff. What was that? Cliff, you live in Ohio. I do. I am in my new opening to the show that I said is, you know, and again, you guys may not like it, and I will take what the crowd likes, but is basically welcome from the Queen City, the Radio City, the great city of Cincinnati in the semi-free United States of America. We'll see if I stick with that. I still don't have an outro like that bastard Tony does. I have to kind of Surf's Up is taken, so. And welcome to the party. You know, I love that line by Bruce Willis, but that's what you say at the beginning. So maybe I'll say it at the beginning, but then it clashes with my other thing. I need a good hasta la vista, baby, kind of, you know, phrase at the end there, like an Arnold Schwarzenegger thing. But that doesn't really feel right. And now saying it in an accent, kind of, well, I said it in a German accent. That's better than if I'd said it in a non-German accent, in which case I guess I'd be racist. I don't know. What else we got, guys? Kamala is basically Gen X. It was born the year of the dragon. 2024 is the year of the dragon. Yeah, I thought it was time for Kamala too. Again, I can't tell you how excited I was. She was my first choice, by the way, in 2020. Just so you know, I thought we were past all this crap. You know, I thought we were done. No more. No more problems due to race. Not when it came to running for president. I'm not naive. A ton of problems due to race and gender and religion, but I thought we could elect someone. We'd gotten beyond that for electing folks, and apparently we haven't. Lucas Kuhn's got carpet bombed with Hawley's anti-trans shit. Yeah, I saw that. And again, listen, man, if it's somebody's right to be trans, somebody's right to love who they want as a trans person, to attend whatever school they want as a trans person, to any number of other things, I will line up on that wall with you. All right? Because when it's your personal rights, you have every fucking right that I have. And again, that's all I can say is I would line up to fight battle with you. I just think when it comes to certain competitions, I think there's a conversation to be had because, again, I have personal experience with this, having been a sprinter and knowing what my times were versus other people's who were men and many have committed suicide. I know, Lisa, and it's horrible. And that's because we haven't supported folks as a society. There were, the 70s and 80s, 90s was a terrible time when you had a lot of gay kids, actually specifically gay and lesbian kids committing suicide. I still believe some of that goes on because obviously conservative households and whatever, but there's a lot more accepting people. America supported equal marriage, which again, I think these guys are going to go after next. And that's just another example of what I said to you. If it's a white Christian straight male who protects gay marriage by winning, or somebody else more diverse and they don't win and we lose marriage equality, isn't that the much worse outcome? And we may lose it now. Obergefell started here in Cincinnati and we may lose it. That Supreme Court, I think they're moving towards it. I don't want anybody to ever commit suicide ever. I mean, I would put so much more money into mental health. I've worked in mental health with certain clients and helping folks. And again, everybody should be able to be what they want to be. I could not feel more strongly about that. It's just when certain parts of who you are affect other people and things you do, then we have to ask questions and be able to have conversations and not just yell and call each other out and call each other names and get into things, especially when we agree on 99% things. Trump has broken America. Yeah, well, it's kind of the name of this. Is America broken? I should have said has Trump. Maybe I'll change it after this. Has Trump broken America? Because he did. We've talked about it before. He has an animal instinct for finding what people want. The worst part of that is there are a decent number of people out there who have that, right? I guess you could call it, people that have that gene or have that ability, sixth sense almost. But the difference is that most of them have a conscience, have empathy, and whatever. So even if they know what everybody wants, they won't just lie, cheat, steal. They're not psychopaths. They're not narcissists. He has the unfortunate combination of being a psychopath, a narcissist, and the ability to know what everybody wants. And those few individuals in society are dangerous as hell. Do they care about the rapist, the criminal? Wait a minute, the Republicans chose him and defended him. No, they don't.